She just serves food to soldiers, my family laughed. Then the prosecutor said, Colonel Carter, what brings you to civilian court? Everyone went pale. My name is Linda Carter, and I am 42 years old. For as long as I can remember, my family has believed that I work in the cafeteria. On a military base, serving food to young soldiers and wiping down trays when the day is done. They never ask many questions, and I never offered corrections. It was easier to let them think I was ordinary than to watch their faces twist in disbelief or judgment. Kept my world private. They kept their assumptions alive. I cannot say it never bothered me at every Christmas dinner or family reunion. My younger sister Sophia talk about her big house, her new car, or her latest vacation. My parents would be with pride while I sat quietly at the corner of the table, smiling when they laughed about me, feeding mashed potatoes to cadets. Stung. But I let it pass. Sometimes silence is a shield. Sometimes it is the only way to keep peace in a family. Does not want to see you for who you really are. Then one Tuesday morning, phone rang before sunrise. It was 6 o'clock and I was already awake, sipping coffee at my kitchen counter, going through notes for another long day at work. I saw my mother's name flashing on the screen. Her voice trembled the second I picked up a desperate tone I had not heard since my father's first heart attack. Linda, she said, Sophia is in trouble, serious trouble. We need your help. Pressed the mug against my chest and listened as she explained between sobs. The FBI had raided Sophia's office. There were whispers of fraud, tax evasion, and prison time. My mother kept saying they needed a lawyer, but good lawyers wanted more money than they could ever afford. I stayed quiet, letting her speak, feeling a strange mix of concern and irony swirl inside. Me, all those years of being dismissed, all those careless words about cafeteria lines. Now, the same family that never respected me was calling for help before dawn. That was the moment I knew life was about to shift. Sophia, golden child from the very beginning. She was the one with the polished grades, cheerleader, smile, and the endless stream of attention from my parents. When she married a successful investment banker and moved into a mansion with spotless white columns and a driveway, big enough for 3 luxury cars. It felt like the final proof that she had done everything right at every family gathering. She arrived glowing in her tailored dresses and left behind a trail of admiration. My parents adored her. They spoke about her with pride to relatives, neighbors, and even the cashier at the grocery store. Every promotion she mentioned, every expensive purchase, every picture of her vacations was met with applause. When it came to me, the introductions were different. This is our other daughter, Linda, they would say quickly as if brushing crumbs from a table. If anyone asked what I did, the answer came in a rehearsed sigh. She just serves food to soldiers. Somebody has to do it. I suppose the words hit me harder than they realized because I heard them often, and I never corrected them 20 years. That sentence trailed me like a shadow at birthdays. When extended family asked about my work, Sophia would smile sweetly and repeat the same line. As if she were the one telling a harmless joke, my parents never stopped her. In fact, they nodded along as if to confirm that this was my truth. I sat there, keeping my jaw tight and my hands folded, reminding myself that silence kept the peace. But inside, every repetition felt like a slap. Sophie, his life was a constant display of success. She hosted dinner parties in her vast kitchen and invited the family to admire the chandeliers imported from Italy. She bragged about her husband's latest bonus, children's private schools, and her European vacations. My mother would drink in the details. My father would toast with pride. And I would quietly excuse myself to the back porch just to breathe. I could not compete, and I never tried. Comparison was relentless. It left little space for me to be seen as anything more than a background figure in my own family. It was not that I lacked achievements. I had spent years working harder than most people imagined possible, pushing myself through grueling schedules, endless training, and responsibilities that carried real weight. Yet in the eyes of my family, those accomplishments did not exist. They had created a story about me, and that story was easier to keep than the truth. Sophia sparkled. I was cast in her shadow serving trays of food in a base cafeteria. Sometimes I wondered why I let them continue believing it. Maybe it was because correcting them felt like trying to change the wind. They did not want to know the truth. It was more convenient for them to see me as the simple, the one who had taken the easy way out. The one who could never threaten Sophia's shine. It was their comfort. And I allowed it even when it chipped away at my pride. Looking back can see how those years shaped me. The sting of their words taught me to swallow anger, to turn humiliation into patience, and to find strength in silence. But it also built a fire inside me, a quiet determination that one day the truth would no longer be hidden. The words "she just serves food to soldiers" echoed in my head more times than I can count. And each time I promised myself I would remember how it felt. I did not know when the moment of reckoning would come, but I carried the weight of those words until the morning my mother called. That was when the story they had written about me began to unravel. The morning my mother called felt different from all the others. Her voice was broken before she even said my name, and there was a ragged edge to her breathing that made my stomach tighten. She told me that Sophia's office had been raided by the FBI agents had carried out boxes of files, hard drives, and computers. While her employees stood outside in shock, my mother kept repeating the same words: fraud, conspiracy, tax, evasion. Words that sounded too heavy to belong to the sister who once bragged about her flawless life. I held the phone tighter and listened. As she cried. The family had already called 3 lawyers. Each one quoted a retainer fee so high that my parents nearly fainted. They did not have that kind of money. And Sophia's accounts were frozen. My mother begged me to do something to find a way out. Every sentence was wrapped in disbelief. "I know you don't know any real lawyers," she said softly. "But maybe you can ask around at the base cafeteria. Maybe one of the cooks knows someone cheap." The words pressed against me like cold steel after decades of letting them believe a lie. They still saw me as nothing more than a woman who carried trays of food. I swallowed my anger because I could hear her tears on the other end of the line. She wanted help. Even if she thought my help would come from some back hallway connection with a janitor or a clerk. Later that day, Father called. His tone was less desperate, more impatient. He said Sophia needed character, witnesses, and support. He asked if I could get a few days off work, since they probably don't like cafeteria workers taking too much time off. He chuckled like it was a harmless joke, but it cut through me in a way he could never understand. My sister's husband called next. He sounded distracted, annoyed, as if he was already calculating what this disaster would cost him socially. He said their lawyer was struggling. The government's case looked airtight. Then he added that I probably could not do much, but at least I could sit beside Sophia in court, so she did not feel alone. He ended the call by reminding me to wear something neat. I would not embarrass the family. By the time all the calls stopped, my chest felt heavy. For years, I had stayed quiet, letting them believe I was someone simple. Now they were in crisis. Still, even in their panic, they could not see me clearly. They needed a savior. Yet they spoke to me like I was an errand girl who might stumble upon a bargain lawyer. I stood by the window of my office that night, watching the streetlights flicker in the distance. Part of me wanted to ignore them, to let the weight of their choices crush them. But another part of me, part that had endured every careless word, knew. This was the moment everything would change, could not turn away. No matter how much bitterness I carried, I decided I would go to Kansas City. I would sit in that courthouse and watch the truth unravel. They thought they knew who I was. They were about to learn that the story they told about me was nothing more than a fragile illusion. 3 days later, I drove into Kansas City, parked outside the federal courthouse. The morning air felt heavy, the kind of air that presses against your chest. I sat for a moment, watching families and lawyers hurry past in neat suits, each face drawn tight with fear or duty. When I finally stepped out of the car, I saw my family clustered on the courthouse steps. My mother clutched her pearls as if the beads themselves could pray. Sophia out of prison. My father waddled, stuffed into a suit that had not fit him in years. Sophia's husband stood apart, growing on his phone, his expression more annoyed than worried. Sophia sat close to my mother, pale and hollow-eyed, her beauty worn thin by nights without sleep. None of them looked up in relief when they saw me. Instead, their faces carried that same mix of pity and quiet judgment. When I walked over, my mother's voice rose in brittle gratitude. "Honey, thank you for coming. I know this isn't really your thing, but maybe you can talk to Sophie. As lawyer, explain how the cafeteria budget works or something. Maybe there's some similarity." She said it with complete seriousness, as if I had nothing more to offer than kitchen math. I nodded once, swallowing hard. My father patted my shoulder like I was a child. "Good of you to take time off from the kitchen," he muttered. I did not bother correcting him. Sophia's husband chuckled and added, "Told the lawyer you probably can't take too much time off, how it is for hourly workers." His laugh was thin, patronizing, the kind of laugh that made my jaw clench, kept my posture straight, steady, and silent. Inside, the courthouse hallways were cold and echoing, my family huddled together, whispering like nervous refugees waiting for news. Sophia's lawyer emerged from a side room. He was a small man in his 50s with kind eyes. The uneasy look of someone who had already realized he was drowning. My mother hurried over, introducing me quickly. This is Linda. My other daughter. She works on a military base. Maybe she understands government forms or red tape." The lawyer shook my hand without confidence. "Nice to meet you, Linda. This is complicated. Federal criminal law and financial regulations. Probably not something you'd encounter in food service." His words were polite, but dismissive. They landed like stones in my stomach. I glanced through the glass door into the conference room and saw Sophia, head in her hands, surrounded by stacks of documents. "May I see the discovery?" I asked quietly. The lawyer blinked in confusion. "What?" He said, "The evidence, the government's file," I clarified. He laughed nervously. "I don't think you'd understand much of it. It's very technical." I didn't move. "Try me." Something in my voice made him hesitate. Glanced toward my mother as if seeking permission, then reluctantly led me into the room. A table was piled with binders, bank records, and IRS filings. To anyone else, it might have looked like endless numbers. To me, it read like a story. I flipped through pages quickly, the way I had trained myself to do searching for cracks. The government's case was strong. Then I saw at a date that did not line up. Records were seized before the warrant was signed. I traced the chain of custody, checking each stamp, my pulse steady. The lawyer leaned over my shoulder. "That's just paperwork," he muttered. But my eyes locked on the detail. It was not just paperwork. It was the kind of mistake that could shift the entire case. I sat back slowly, breathing in the weight of what I had found. No one else in the room noticed to them. I was still the sister from the cafeteria. Being pages, I could not possibly understand, but I knew the truth. The crack in their perfect case was sitting right there in my hands. Conference room door opened with a sharp click. A woman in her 30 seconds stepped inside, carrying a slim file, and moving with the confident stride of someone who owned the space. I recognized her immediately, though my family did not. She was Assistant U.S. Attorney Morrison, a prosecutor I had crossed paths with in several high-profile court-martial appeals. Her reputation was fierce, her record nearly flawless. She greeted the room quickly, then her eyes landed on me. Her brows lifted in surprise, before she broke into a thin smile. "Colonel Carter," she said evenly. "What brings you to civilian court?" The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a long second, no one moved. My sister's lawyer blinked. As if struck dumb, my mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My father's face flushed, crimson, confused and shaken. Sophia's husband straightened his jaw tightening, as though refusing to believe what he had just heard. Sophia herself stared at me, her eyes wide, disbelief written across her face. "Colonel," my father whispered as if testing the word. Sophia's husband finally broke the silence with a laugh that sounded more like a bark. "No. She serves food in the cafeteria. She is not a colonel." His voice cracked as though he needed to convince himself. I met his eyes calmly. "No," I said, "I don't serve food. I am a lawyer with the Judge Advocate General's Corps for 12 years. I have prosecuted some of the most complex cases in military law. I hold the rank of Lieutenant Colonel." Morrison nodded, her tone crisp. "She is one of the toughest attorneys I've ever gone against. I have lost appeals to her that still sting." The confirmation was enough to drain the color from Sophia's face. My mother pressed her hand against the wall for support. My father looked like the ground had shifted beneath him. The lawyer staggered, flipping through papers. "Colonel Carter," he repeated, trying to reconcile the timid cafeteria story. The woman standing in front of him, Sophia's husband, muttered something under his breath and stared at the floor, pushed the binder across the table toward Morrison. "There's a chain of custody issue with the bank records. I said your agents collected evidence on March 14th, but the warrant is dated March 15th. That makes the entire set inadmissible." Morrison flipped through the documents, her sharp eyes scanning. Curse slipped under her breath before she straightened. "You're right," she admitted. "Without those records, we lose the pattern evidence, changes everything." Sophie, as lawyer, sat stunned. "That's their whole case," he whispered. Morrison ignored him and turned back to me. "Colonel, I can offer a revised plea. 1 count of tax evasion, 18 months in minimum security and supervised release after from 25 years to less than 2. Sophia gasped, tears rushing into her eyes. She turned toward me, her lips trembling. "Linda, you're a colonel. You're a lawyer." Her voice was small, broken. I nodded once. "And right now, that is the only reason you are not facing decades in prison." Her husband shook his head, still refusing. "But all these years we thought," I cut him off with a steady look. "You thought I was in the cafeteria." "You thought wrong." The room fell into silence again, broken only by Sophia's sobs. My mother reached for me, but her hands trembled too much to hold steady. My father tried to speak, but no words came. Every illusion they had clung to for 20 years crumbled in that moment. I kept my voice calm as I looked at Sophia. "Take the deal. It is the only mercy you will get." Morrison gathered her file, nodding toward me in respect. "Colonel, always a pleasure," she said before leaving the door closed behind her, leaving the echo of her words in the stunned air. My family stared at me as if they had never seen me before. For the first time in my life, I did not feel small in their presence, felt exactly who I was. The room erupted after Morrison left, but I stood still, letting the noise wash over me. Sophia cried into her hands, her shoulders shaking. My mother asked the same question over and over, her voice high and frantic. "Why didn't you tell us, Linda? Why didn't you say?" My father paced the narrow space. Red-faced and stunned Sophia's husband muttered quietly to himself, his phone clutched in his hand, like it could give him answers. I finally spoke. You never asked, not really. You were content to believe I was something small, because it was easier for you. The room fell quiet, the weight of my words pulling them still. My mother's lips trembled. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but nothing came. I looked at Sophia, her face streaked with tears for years. You introduced me as the sister who worked in a cafeteria. You laughed at me in front of people. You never once listened when I tried to tell you about my work. You didn't want to know. You preferred the version of me that fit your story. She lowered her eyes, shame spilling out in silence. Turning to my parents, I kept my voice steady. When I got promoted, when I earned rank, when I carried responsibility, you couldn't imagine you brushed it aside. Christmas. You spent more time talking about Sophia's scar than my career. You thought I was a failure because it was convenient. My mother covered her face with her hands. My father's fists opened and closed, but he said nothing. Sophia's husband tried to speak, but his words faltered. We just thought we didn't realize his voice trailed off. When he saw my expression, I had no patience left for excuses. I faced him squarely. You thought I was beneath you. You thought my life was nothing more than trays and ladles, and you were wrong. Turned back to Sophia. Her sobs had softened, but her eyes clung to mine. You should take the plea deal, I said. 18 months in minimum security is a gift. If you violate the terms, can bring back every charge. Do not mistake this for a rescue. It is the last thread keeping you from ruin. My mother reached for me again, but I stepped back. I need you to understand something, told them all. This was a one-time favor. I will not be the safety net for your choices. I carried the weight of your judgment 20 years, but I will not carry your mistakes. The silence that followed was sharper than shouting. My father's shoulders sagged. Sophia's husband stared at the floor. Sophia nodded slowly, tears still falling. Her voice small. I'm sorry, Linda. I really am. But I did not let the apologies soften me. Sorry does not erase what you did. Sorry does not erase the years. You dismissed me. Live with what you chose. I smoothed down my jacket, feeling the firmness in my own spine. For once, I was not shrinking in their presence. I was standing in it fully carrying the truth of who I had always been. They had never cared to see it. That was no longer my burden. As I walked to the door, my mother called my name again, pleading. I paused only long enough to look back. This was the last time I said, remember that. Then I stepped into the hallway, leaving their stunned faces behind. I left the courthouse with the sound of their whispers fading behind me. The sun hit my face as I stepped into the street. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing down on my shoulders. My phone buzzed with messages from my office, reminders about cases waiting on my desk. And I welcomed the thought of returning to the life I had built on my own, driving back toward the base. I let the silence of the car settle around me. My family might spend hours talking about what they had just learned, trying to reconcile the woman. They thought they knew with the truth that had shattered their version of me. Maybe they would apologize. Maybe they did not matter anymore. I was finished waiting for them to see me, finished hoping for their approval. What mattered were the soldiers who trusted my judgment, colleagues who respected my work, the reputation I had earned through 2 decades of discipline and sacrifice. My value was never in their hands. Though I had let their opinions wound me for far too long, that wound had closed now, and what remained was strength. As I thought about the prosecutor's offer for civilian work, I smiled to myself. Pay might be better, the hours more regular. But it also meant working with people like Sophia, people who thought rules bent around them. I preferred my place in uniform among those who understood duty and honor. That world made sense to me. It was where I belonged. I knew my family would always see what they wanted to see to them. I had been a cafeteria worker for 20 years because that was easier than asking questions. Truth no longer needed their permission. I had proven it in that room, not for their acceptance, but for my own clarity. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Never underestimate someone because of the story you have chosen to believe about them. The person you dismiss might be the only one who can save you. When the ground shifts beneath your feet, don't judge too quickly. Because the truth is often far more powerful than appearances. And now I ask you, have you ever been judged unfairly only to prove everyone wrong in the end?